Welcome back, MTG Joe here. We're here for another weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. This video is for the historic best of 1 format. If you're looking for historic best of 3, standard, explorer, alchemy, they're all in the playlist, curated, flagged, tagged, best of 1, best of 3, so you can find whatever you need each week in the playlist. And we get the data to supplement these types of videos. So we're not just arbitrarily saying this is a tier 1 deck. We look at win rate stats that are tracked by UntapGG. It's a companion tool that runs alongside Arena's client, tracks your individual win rate, and then aggregates it with all the users and gives us cool stats that we look at. Link for Untapped is in the video description if you want to get started. And then I'll paste all these deck lists, timestamp the videos, so you can jump between whatever you want in that respect. So for today, like I said, we are looking historic best of 1. Historic got the injection of Lord of the Rings cards as well, and we see some of them starting to shape the format. Now, as we always start off, we look at the meta distribution in terms of the popularity of decks. So popularity doesn't necessarily correlate to the win rates necessarily. So decks can be very popular, but don't have the highest win rate necessarily, and vice versa. So we'll start with there. And then we'll look at, so the data itself for this week is going to be from July 27th through to the 4th of July. And then because the ladder just reset a couple days ago, we're looking platinum to mythic rank for this week's video. And then we eventually scaled it to mythic once more folks are in. If you're looking at mythic right now, there's like, I looked diamond to mythic, there's one deck. It's still fairly early in the season. Folks are trying stuff out after the reset as well. So despite the date here, we're looking at popularity of the day, so it doesn't really matter that this is from July. So the most popular decks right now is the Izzet Wizards deck in best of 1. I can say that this very much was my feel so far. Feels like at least one of 3 decks, like half my games have been against Izzet Wizards. They got a bunch of new cards from the recent set. That really kind of supplement the approach of the deck, give it some good redundancy. There's Rakdos Midrange that got some upgrades as well. I know what you're thinking. Rakdos, they haven't given it any good cards in the last 8 minutes. Let's give it some more. And then we have the Squirrel Twin, which is the Helioak Combo. Got Rosie in there. Mono Green Elves, it's always been played in some popularity, but very seldomly actually makes the list in terms of win rates. It's usually seen in the lower ranks, but doesn't really pop up. Like even when I was looking at the stats, I just didn't get anything popping up. We have Control, which has some different variants. Another deck that didn't have enough individual representation to show up in the list this week. Affinity is just like your artifact deck. So interesting, like a deck, we have the Esper Affinity because it's a very budget-friendly deck, and we'll look at that, but the Boros version always tends to perform better. So like we see Esper Affinity actually has a pretty high win rate for the day, kind of looking with that. So if we look at just kind of the trends, Rakdos has really kind of had an increase the last week with the addition of like the One Ring and Orcish Bowmasters. Wizards has always been pretty much the top in terms of popularity, but like last week when we were looking, it was up to 23%. We've seen declines on some of the other decks. There was just a video on the Arena page from showing this combo, but there's a couple different versions of it going around and just ways you can configure it. So looking at the data itself, we have 25,000 games played for the week, basically the last 7 days. And again, the highest win rate deck is the Belcher deck, 65%. It's a very linear deck. Couple different configurations on how you can play it, but the core of the deck is Goblin Charbelcher in the deck with no lands, but lands. And the way you do that is by having all these module dual face lands. So all the lands in the deck are of this nature. So when you activate Belcher, you flip your whole deck, there's no lands, and then you deal that much damage to your opponent. You can get this combo off as early as turn 3 with Strike It Rich or Treasure Maker from Magma Opus. You cast Ironcrag Feet, it generates 7 mana, enough to cast the Belcher and activate at the same turn. You can also creativity any of your treasures into the Belcher and get it into play that way there. You have protection with Pact to Negation. You also have March of Reckless Joy as well as Reckless Handling as ways to find the artifact itself, which is the Belcher. The lands, like I said, they're all the dual face lands, and then you can make treasures with Strike It Rich, Magma Opus, and then you have some interaction with Strangle. So just some cheap interaction there. Interesting seeing Zerda as the companion here. So 65% win rate deck. It's a very linear combo deck. You're just doing your thing, largely ignoring what your opponent does, and just try to win as early as possible. From there, we go to Boros Thopters, Boros Aggro, Boros Affinity, whatever you want to call it. 64% win rate deck. This is an artifact aggro deck that's built around the engine of Retrofitter Foundry. So this lets you upgrade any of your Thopters with the last ability into 4/4 constructs for free. And then you have stuff like Ornithopter, which is a 0 mana that you can make it into 4/4 on turn 1. Barb Spike as well as Yotai both make you Thopters, so some value there. You have Mashiko to pump your squad. Ingenious Smith finds you action. The Esper Sentinel is a way to get you some card draw. Portable Holes removal, Shadow Spear for lifelink, and Trample. And then Toolcraft is just a cheap kind of beater in the 1-drop slot. This is also a Lurrus companion deck, so you can rebuy stuff from your graveyard. So not sequentially the next highest win rate, but I wanted to kind of showcase. So this is a very budget-friendly version. So this too can be built as a Lurrus companion. This actual configuration has no rares or mythics in it. So if you want to get started in Historic, this is actually a pretty solid way. At the very least, if you have 4 rare wildcards, I cannot stress enough how good this card is. In these shells, it's kind of the engine of the deck, so pick up your Retrofitter Foundry if this is an archetype you like. I'd say Retrofitter and Esper Sentinel would be 2 of your main things. This current configuration is fairly heavy on 2-drops. Now, keep in mind the Vault Scourge in this deck is going to be paid for 1 mana and 2 life, so it's really a 1-drop in this particular build. This version of the deck is going to be using All That Glitters and Ensoul Artifact as ways to create large creatures. And then you could also Ensoul Artifact your Darksteel Citadel and make it an indestructible creature. So same kind of idea as you can do Unblockable Ginger Brute. You have the Razortide Bridge as a way to have a cheap creature that's also indestructible. So same idea as the Darksteel Citadel. So if you're looking for like a cheap budget deck, definitely something to consider in that respect. From there, we go to Abzan Sacrifice. So this is one of the infinite combos that we got in the most recent set, 64% win rate. So how it works is with Samwise Gamgee, Cauldron Familiar, and any free sack outlet, so in this case Woe Strider, you're able to infinitely have the cat enter the battlefield and die, which drains out your opponent. Now notably this is life loss as opposed to damage, so it gets around protection effects, anything of that nature. How it works is Gamgee, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, you create a food token, so then when you sack the Cauldron Familiar, that food token brings it back, which creates a food token. Cycle, 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 drain your opponent, they cry. So the deck itself, you have like Delighted Halfling that can ramp you, same with Gilded Goose, you have some Fatal Pushes, Deadly Dispute for card advantage, we have the Orcish Bowmasters as a way to ping and punish your opponent. Priest of Forgotten Gods helps you dig. Tyvar lets you dig for the combo as well. And then you have some Collected Companies to also kind of help you pull together the remaining pieces of the combo. Jen got the companion on this one here. From there, we go to Rakdos Midrange. So this is 64% win rate, and we are leveraging both the One Ring here, so gives you protection the turn it enters the battlefield, and then it draws you cards, puts counters on burden counters, so you technically lose a life each turn based on the number of burden counters, but you pair that up with something like Shieldred, and you basically just net a whole bunch of life, and it allows you to just kind of outgrind your opponent value-wise. You have Fables, Cruciuses in here to find you your key cards, some Bork Masters, Orcish Bowmasters, this name just keeps getting me. Crocs in here, some Heartless Axe pushes, and then just the 7 discard effects. So eat away at your opponent's hand, then kind of find your powerful effects, refill with the One Ring, and then win with like Shieldred or the Bowmaster's kind of effect in that respect. You also have like the creature lands to grind some value. Moving on, we go to the Gruul Goblins list. So this is kind of a combo creature style strategy. So it's built around Cabaretti Revels, which whenever you cast a creature spell, kind of think of it like Cascade in a way, where you get to seek a creature card with lesser mana value, put it into the battlefield. So what you're trying to do is just kind of spam a whole bunch of creatures. You can sack creatures to Skirk Prospector to gain you mana that lets you keep casting. Goblin Influx Array also reduces the cost of creatures, as well as Goblin Trap Finder can seek a creature and give it reduced cost. Whenever things die, you can have them get pinged with the Palishmons. You also get card advantage, like pseudo card advantage from Ruvenald, so some value there. You get haste for the turn and just do like a big alpha attack, or you can activate the Krenko, which then gives you more fodder. So there's a lot of ways to kind of generate mana. The Goblin or Narcomancer also reduces the cost of creatures. So you look at, like, say you have a Narcomancer out and you cast a Goblin Instigator for 1 mana, and then you could kind of make 2 mana out of it, so you kind of get some value there. So it's a very kind of aggressive, kind of stormy deck. Playing this deck a bit, like I did it for the last metagame challenge, having this card out versus not having it out is a big difference. You can also play Squee the Immortal, and then with Cabaretti Revels is effectively, if you can get enough cost reduction, you can keep casting Squee over and over from your graveyard, sacking it, and getting that value there. So you could almost pretty much play out your entire deck. Then we go to the Wizards. The Wizards. So most popular deck, still sitting around 60%. So I know last week we kind of spoke about it, but there's some different configurations with the Birthday Escape and Ranger's Firebrand. So notably, these are both sorcery speed cards. However, they do provide you with the Ring Tempts You. So it allows your the first mode, they're kind of like dungeons. Target creature becomes a legendary, so you give someone a Ring Bearer. Can't be blocked by creatures with power greater, so that works really nice with something like a Dreadhorde Arcanist or any of these small creatures with prowess, because you can attack in, they're not able to be blocked, and then you can cast spells with Arcanist that can kind of let you push through damage. Second mode lets you draw a discard. Third mode, if they get blocked, your opponent has to sacrifice something. Fourth mode is if they deal combat damage, your opponent takes 3 damage. So from there, the card that's like a little bit odd here, doesn't usually see play, is the Grim Lavamancer. Haven't played with this card in a while in this shell, so can't really comment on this, but it does provide another wizard. I honestly would probably just play another Reckless Charge. This card's very good. But you have Symmetry Sage that buffs your team, that lets you cast back more of the higher converted mana costs. The one downside with these 2 cards is they're not instant, so you can't do like the instant speed kind of effects of, like attack, and then depending on what they do, then prowess. So it's an interesting consideration there. You have Burn with Static Discharge, Wizard's Lightning, Expressive Iteration as card draw, and then notably now, like between Bowmaster and Shieldred, the Expressive Iteration is probably better than Mentor's Guidance, given that you won't get pinged by that. It's an exile effect. But the big card that's really been impressive thus far to me is the Flame of Anor. So I didn't read this the first time, or I didn't play around it properly. So as you cast the spell is the key. So if you control a wizard as you cast the spell, so you can't even respond to it necessarily by killing the wizard. So you're sequencing, be mindful when you're playing this deck, because all like usually you want to like wait for them to do something because they might like target the spell or anything like that. But it sometimes now makes sense to be more proactive in terms of killing your opponent's creatures. But this lets you draw 2 cards, which is a pretty big effect. Destroy an artifact. There's a lot of incidental artifacts. Kind of a flavor fail, or maybe not, but like it's destroy target artifact as opposed to exile, so it can't hit the One Ring. And then it does deal 5 damage to target creature, which hits Shieldred or even Jengantha. I had a game where just hitting Jengantha was pretty relevant. Jengantha Companion for the deck itself. Even with like Balmor, like some of these numbers, usually you'll see Balmor as a 3 of, but it's a very powerful deck. And like I can show you some stats. I was playing with, I was forcing mono red burn with the Ring, and most of my matches were against wizards. So the Scurry Oak combo, everything that's showing up on tapped right now is a little old. I was playing around with this. I'm 5-0 with it, so don't take it as like a definitive. We have a 5-game sample size, but if you want a general idea of what this deck's trying to do, so how it works is with Scurry Oak, and then with Heliod, and then anything that gains a life when it enters the battlefield. So Lunarch Veteran, Soul Warden, or Prosperous Innkeeper is an infinite combo, which gives you infinite life, infinite creatures, infinitely large Scurryoak as fast as you can click. So how it works is Scurryoak enters the battlefield, triggers Heliod's life gain, you put a counter onto Scurryoak. Scurryoak then creates a squirrel token, which gains you life, which puts the counter on Scurryoak. You keep going through the cycle. You also have Rosie of South Lane. So this is a 2-card combo with Scurryoak. So you can, you don't, like with the other life gain effects, you can gain infinite life as well, but the two of them combo on its own. So when it enters the battlefield, you create a food token. Whenever a creature, whenever you create a token, put a 1/1 counter on a creature you control other than Rosie. So the food token triggers a 1/1 counter on Scurryoak, which then gives you a token, and then you basically go infinite that way as well. We're finding the combo both with Inquisitor Captain and Collect a Company. We have the Fair Game Plan of Voice of the Blessed and Trelasara. And then you have like Prosperous Innkeeper, Soul Warden, Luminarch Veteran to gain you life as well. So that's like one of the versions of the deck. You can kind of build it with like Esper Sentinels. You can do more interactive with Skyclave Operation. I just went very linear in terms of the combo itself. And then just kind of, I tried Ring Burn. I'll have a video up on it. We ran pretty poor, but I was having fun. But you can see here, I played 19 games, 7 of them were against Wizards, and then another 5 against Rakdos. So 12 of my 19 games were against the 2 decks. The Rakdos match is pretty rough. I was doing pretty well. I was like 8-5, and then I just had a pretty rough streak. But trying to use like the One Ring to refill your hand, and then you have like just a bunch of burn spells. But ultimately, it felt like a worse Wizards deck. You were kind of reliant on hitting the One Ring to refill your hand, but you also didn't have like the burst damage that Wizards necessarily has. So burn still feels a little rough. I wanted to try it with the ladder reset to see if it could work out, but when your mono red deck's got an on the play 34% win rate, it's a little tough. You ultimately have to use a lot of your burn to control their creatures, which then kind of puts you behind in that respect. But it's an idea. That's what we try to do. Test out these things, see if it can work, if it doesn't. But at the end of the day, it's about learning. There's no point. Like, if we wanted to just go for, like, right away, I would have just picked up Wizards. You could push. But you want to try out, see if anything new or fun can be played in that respect. In any case, going to wrap this up. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you have a great one, and stay safe out there.